Okay, for the Excel standards, if you end up working with Excel, it's likely that somebody will eventually want to look at your workbooks. So Excel standards are important for making your workbook easy to read, easy to manage, and easy to understand. And it's not just for somebody else looking at it, because oftentimes you're going to go back and look at your own workbooks a month later or a year later, and it's important that you understand what was going on when you did it the first time. So the first thing we're going to do is freezing panes. Freezing panes is actually quite nice because it lets you lock in certain columns and certain rows. And I wrote here that it's usually at least the leftmost column and the column headers that you want to freeze. And I know this isn't a big deal if you've got this small table like this, but I know it as Alt WFF. That will freeze the cell that you're currently on, and that'll lock the employee ID. And so if you've got a table with a bunch of columns in it, you can scroll all the way to the side and you see how it still locks this employee ID here. So you can always see which row you're looking at. The same with if you scroll all the way down, you can see that these column headers are staying with you. So if you're way off over here in the boonies looking at formulas, you can still see which employee ID you're looking at and what column headers it is that you're looking at right here. So these can be quite helpful when analyzing data. Remember freezing frames. Okay, grouping columns and rows. This is what I've been doing for all of my other functions down here. All of these are grouped rows right here. And these are quite helpful, not just for lectures where you're hiding a spoiler of an answer, but it's also useful because sometimes you don't want to look at every row and every column. So you can say, I don't want to look at these. Shift, Alt, and right groups. Shift, Alt, and left ungroups. And this can be helpful for hiding and revealing. But as you see, if it's a group, you can see that there are grouped rows here. Whereas you have the option in Excel to just go and right-click, hide a column. And it just goes from B to E, and it doesn't really show you an indicator that these two columns are hidden. You kind of have to look between and say, oh, look at that. There's a double line there, and B to E, that's not consecutive in the alphabet, and it's not immediately obvious that there's something hidden there. That can be helpful when other people are looking at your workbooks or when you're looking at your workbooks and you want to remember where your columns are. Let me unhide those, ungroup those. All right, tabs. These little tabs down here, the sheet names. There's a lot of important things you want to know about tabs. Good descriptive names are important. You always want to know what tab you're searching for. Colors can be helpful. As you see for the pivot table, I made all of these an orange color. The data ones, I made the brightest colors. Colors can be quite helpful in organizing. And of course, last thing I wrote here is consider a summary tab. I don't know if I have one here. Let me go Control page up, page up. I do have a summary tab. In this case, I used my summary tab for a quick introduction, but this is also a good way you could type what it is you're trying to accomplish with this workbook, how people can navigate it. There's a lot of things that you can put on a summary tab that people can use to quickly understand what this workbook is about. If I had to go and Control page down, go back down the workbook. All right, comments are really nice, and this goes for all programming. It's not just Excel. Comments are always great, not just for other people understanding your work, but for you later understanding your work. It can organize things great. Can never have enough comments. Really though, write lots of comments. Everybody likes comments. You can do it with the single apostrophe, and then everything you write after that is going to be a comment. So use lots of those. Formatting is important. Makes things much more readable, and that's pretty much the only advantageous part of it. Hyperlinks. Something that sometimes you'll use them if you want to link workbooks to other workbooks because maybe there's too much data to fit into one single workbook. Hyperlinks are a good way to do it. I don't know how to find it in here, but if you click Control K, it'll bring up a hyperlink dialog box where you can go and say, oh, I want to link this here. And it'll create a link that if you click on it, you can go and it will open up that linked workbook or that linked PDF. There's a lot of things that you could hyperlink to say, this is where I found this information to make it easy for other people to follow it. And if you are in fact going from workbook to workbook, I wrote here, never use functions between workbooks. They're unreliable. They only update when both workbooks are open. You don't want to do it. And the last thing I wrote here is formulas. Formulas are assumed to apply to an entire column. So if you're going to make a column of formulas, let me find one that I've done. If you make a formula column, it is just assumed that you're going to do a formula for the entire column. You're not going to put a formula here and then make these values and then put another formula here because you want to do one on this row, they're just going to assume that all of these are formulas. And so you want to, once again, leave good comments. Let people know, hey, this cell has a formula in it. So they don't go and overwrite your formulas when they're looking at it. So those are just some good professional standards for Excel. Hopefully, if you're ever working with people, you're not the person that leaves no comments and doesn't hyperlink other sources for things and doesn't freeze panes. Be a good employee, be a good coworker. All right, last couple of tips and then we're done with this and we can move on to what you really came here for, which is all of the practice, the exercises, the practice tests, and the projects. Automatic versus manual calculations. This can be quite helpful. The time when you'll usually want this is because Excel workbooks can get quite slow at times, especially if you're using lots of data. As you see, this goes down to over 1 million rows. If you've got 1 million rows with functions in it, and you've got functions going for 30 columns, and these columns are super long array functions, it can take a long time to process. Every time you change something in an Excel cell, if I were to type F here, with automatic calculations, it updates every formula in Excel. Whereas if you can go and you can change that to manual calculations, and that makes it to where if you're doing work on the side, it's not taking 5 seconds every time you put something in a cell to recalculate all of the formulas in your workbook. And there's 2 ways you can go and you can change this. One is you could just go to the formulas header, and you could go to calculation options, and you can say manual. And that does it to where if you said equals this plus 1, and if I had a number here, it doesn't automatically update it. It's still at 1. I would have to go and click F9, and you see it now updates all of the formulas. And I could change this to 5, and you see it's not updating. And this makes it to where you're not taking a bunch of time processing if you're not done with the formulas or you don't want to update the formulas just because you made a small change on the side. And we can change this back to automatic right there. And the last place that you can do this is you can go File, and in the Ever Flexible Options page, you can go to Formulas, and you can change the workbook calculation right there. That's also another way to do it. Paste Special. You've seen me use this many times at this point. Is if you copy something, you may just want to take the value. Once again, if I just do this plus 1, and this is 10. If I copied this all down here, it'll bring the formula down, it'll bring the formatting down. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe there's times when if you do Control-Alt-V, you bring it up, you only want the formula, or you only want the value, which I wrote here is one of the most important ones, is paste as values. Press V. And as you see, there's a line under each of these, A for all, V for values, F for formula, that you can just press F, V, E for transpose, and that'll go ahead and automatically do it. Once again, this is the important part, learning your hotkeys. You can quickly navigate through these. And so I'm only going to take the values, and you see all the bold, all the border, all the formula, none of that was copied, just the values. That's something that is quite helpful. Learn your paste specials. All right, 2 more things I want to cover. Text to columns. This is great if you're copying in data, you have another source and you bring it in, and you've got data like Sam, Michelle, or Mike, it's not a comma, it's a semicolon, I'll just do Sam again. You can do text to columns right here. If I go to data, text to columns, and you can actually split this up, saying there's text in 1 columns and I want to split them based on a delimiter. You can also do fixed width, but I find delimiter to be much more common. And you can click what delimiter you want. In this case, I don't want tabs. I'm only going to use semicolons. And you see it already draws a line down the middle there saying we're going to make this into 2 different columns because that's how many semicolons we found in this column. You can click next, and this page not as important. You can click finish, and you see it split those into 2 columns based on the delimiter being the semicolon between these 2 words. So that's something that can be quite helpful. And find and replace. Find and replace is something nice. You don't need to write a formula to make changes into your data. It can be helpful to remove unnecessary spaces. It can be helpful for removing dashes and SSNs. So there's a time when I worked with social security numbers a lot. 234, that's not the format, it's actually 324, isn't it? Anyway, you'll get data like this, and you'll get, data from a different source that doesn't use the dashes. And if you want to make this match this, a good way is to just go Control H, and you can find a dash, replace it with nothing, and then if you find next, it'll find something here. You can say replace, and it'll remove, or quickly make that a text so it's not putting it in scientific notation. There we go. I'll just put it in general. In general puts it out, and as you see, these two match. Well, they should if I wrote this right. There. Anyway, that was supposed to be a demonstration on the Control H, the find and replace menu. That can be quite helpful in Excel. And these are a few tips that you can use that'll hopefully make your experience with Excel a little bit more broad and exciting. That didn't make any sense, but you know what I'm saying. Hopefully these help. Anyway, if you've sat through all these lectures, you've heard me talk for quite some time. And Excel is really about practice. It's really about getting in there, learning how to navigate a workbook. And so go on to the exercises and do all of those. If you can do those, go on and attempt a project. And if you can do the projects and you do well on the practice tests, you are absolutely ready. You are a master of Excel, and you can move on to bigger and brighter things. So go on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the exercises.